Hello, everybody, and here we are at edition 206 of the Frank and Stan chat. And for those of you watching on video, you'll see that we've got a guest who's come back again. So, Emma Knights, hello, Emma, how are you?
I am.
Hello, I'm good. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me back. That's a
no, no,
real that's a real pleasure.
you've stepped away from the National Governors Association, so we thought you could spill the beans. Let's have all the gossip now. We can really make no, no. But anyway, it's great to have you back, and there's quite a lot going on at the moment around this. So we'll get into some of the detail and see what you're doing. But before we do, just get to Stan. How are you this morning, Stan?
Oh, okay. I'm as was.
As was.
I think when you get to our age, staying the same is a win,
Wow.
isn't
Yeah.
it?
That's what they say for joggers. If you can maintain a sort of time for 10K as you get older, you're actually getting better,
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah. Well, it's great to have you back, Emma. Thank you. So
thank you.
since we last spoke, you have stepped down from the CEO role at the NGA. I'm just sort of interested as how, because anybody steps away from a senior post, you know what it's like, but how's it felt for you?
Well, I had done it for an enormously long time. It's almost 15 years. So it definitely was right. It was right for the organization and right for me. And I'm just really pleased. I think I was waiting for that point where I felt that the organization was really sustainable. Because being a charity, third sector organization, we're making our own money. And actually, that's one of the things I'm most pleased about, that NGA isn't reliant on now on any government contracts or anything
Right.
similar. We are still calling it we. That's NGA sells
Well, 15
services,
years, long time.
yeah, to schools, and that's how it sustains itself. So the fact that it was secure both in terms of finances and in terms of this good staff team, really strong staff team, but also actually in terms of what it produced for its members and its the folk that it worked with in terms of developing governance. So that was really a point of saying, actually, although I felt I had energy and enthusiasm to do other things, there comes a point when actually you realize, no, I'm struggling to say the word retired. I think when you say how did, that was a big deal. I could deal more with leaving NGA. That felt right and proper, but it was like, oh, I'm actually going to be a retired person. So there was quite a bit of making sure I have, other things that I wanted to do and feel passionate about, because I've always, been passionate about the things I've worked with or volunteered for. And it was interesting that was my main worry in that last year run up, is like, how would it be? And I'm
Yeah,
sure you
yeah,
both, I'm sure have had similar, where you're in a really full on job and then it's not there anymore.
yeah.
But that wasn't the bit that bothered me, that in practice turned out to be the thing, because I discovered it's so lovely to do other things. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure you're the same as you've moved through your life and career. We've moved around the country a lot. We have friends in all sorts of places. They've moved. You don't always see them. And now you can say, oh, I can come to Aberystwyth and see you for a weekend. Or, yesterday, we're actually people are sometimes quite rude about the Midlands and Birmingham, but so lucky where I live. I have the RSC in Stratford and very near me, and Birmingham with the rep, and last night there was the Royal Birmingham Ballet. It's tremendous. What a treat. It's the sort of thing that I didn't really have as much time for. So I can just say, it enables you to bring more fun
Yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm interested. So you gave them a reasonable length of time to find a replacement. I always think that's quite
Yes.
important, isn't it? To give, not to land it on somebody,
Well, and actually, my board of trustees were very open with me when I did give my notice. In fact, the previous year, they did say, Emma, will you stay on and
Mm.
do a job share in order to bring someone else in? And they were very keen. They did do an internal recruitment. So I hope that was helpful. I mean, I thought that's where I misunderstood what, and I've been a job share a couple of times before in my career, so it wasn't entirely new to me. But I did find, there's always work to do, isn't there? And we just had enough work for the both of us to do more than our 3 days. So I didn't really have 2 clear days for doing other things. So that was the plan, that in those other 2 days I was going to be writing a book, and basically the other work seeped
Always
into
do. Always do.
it. So I wasn't disciplined. With hindsight, I should have been more disciplined.
It's the same in many jobs. I mean, when teachers used to say to me, I'm thinking of going part-time, I used to say full-time job, part-time pay is what you'll end up with if you're not there. Because that's what happens. They use their spare day or 2 days to prepare and do their work in, which maybe it frees up some of their evenings. But I've just never met anybody who's disciplined enough, certainly as a teacher, to be able to say, that's it, I switch off and I don't do anything until...
Well, the one time I was really good at it was when I had small children and primary school children, because then you have them and their needs. So people did say you won't manage it. And actually, I thought it was wonderful. I worked Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Tuesday and Thursday were my time with the kids. And actually, it gives you quite a lot, again, of energy. I spent a day sitting on the floor doing jigsaw puzzles or Duplo train sets or whatever it might be. So that worked, but it's because you had their needs. Whereas, once you don't have something else going, no, you have to do me on your 2 days off. It doesn't work quite so brilliantly.
Frank and I have got grandchildren, and although they bring lots of pleasure, I'm not sure they bring any energy.
I mean, one of the things I struggled with, Emma, is and I think when you're a CEO of an organisation that works in the state sector, you're always careful. I think you have to be careful about not being too critical of, in effect, the government. And in that time as my CEO, we only had one political party as the government. But when you're released from it, I found it quite challenging, because I just want to sort of, be very open about what I didn't like, with the sort of things that I couldn't say as a CEO. I mean, there must have been occasions, and particularly with the funding around NGA, where there must have been times when you thought, oh, goodness me, you perhaps wanted to say more than you could, but then in effect, as a charity dependent on, at that time, quite a lot on government funding, there's a limit to how far you can go.
That is a really interesting question, and a huge one as well for a membership organisation, because I took incredibly seriously, and NGA continues to take it very seriously, the views of our members. And our members are, of course, right across the political spectrum. And so there was also that balancing. We claim to be, or aim to be, representative of our members' views. And members that engaged with us on this sort of thing would say, we know that, we're not going to agree with you every single thing you say, but it was getting that balance right. And some of the things that made it simpler was when we knew pretty much 100% of our membership was on board on something. So because we did, or NGA, obviously, I haven't quite sorted that out, because NGA did annual surveys of governors and trustees. We really did have our finger on the pulse, and I think the Department for Education recognised that as well. We weren't the sort of organisation that came at things from an ideological position. Well, had some. Place is important. So there were certain things that were important to our philosophy of education, but not in terms of party politics. So actually, the funding one is a really, really interesting one, because I was there during the discussions around the national funding formula. Gosh, didn't they go on for years and years, and are still not quite done?
No, well.
So their different regions had such different views. So London had one view on that, and the southwest and other counties had a very, very different. They have 40 local authorities had a very, very different view. So that was a really hard one, and there were times when we just had to say, particularly in front of a London audience, you're not going to like what I'm about to say. So that was but do you know what that actually made? It was a privilege to represent, you know, that huge workforce. And that sort of came with the job. I had to be then, you know, brave enough to go and say, well, this is our stand on the national funding formula. This is why, and you're probably going to boo. Right. But absolutely, your point about politics, really careful to not let one's own political views colour the discussions too much. Obviously, you know, we all bring our baggage, don't we, to things. So clearly some of the things that I care enormously about, like, you know, disadvantage and, you know, equality and diversities, of course that was going to colour what I said and did. But in terms of politics, yes, I think it's a real art, and quite frankly, it is why I stayed there so long, because I did find the most interesting part of the job was actually listening to members. I particularly have to say pre-COVID, when you were actually physically somewhere. You know, if you walk into a governor's event in Surrey, you know you're not in the same place as walking into one in Sunderland. You know the conversation will be slightly different, and I loved that. But then taking that information back and knowing what to do with it and how to, or trying, not knowing, you didn't know, you had to put it out and talk to colleagues and others, try ideas out, but then working out, so what are the things we can actually influence this government on, and what are the things that we could say 500 times and get nowhere. So actually it's not, well, we're not going to drop it as a policy, but we're not going to spend lots of time trying to influence people.
That's a good example of your freedom, because today in Schools Week you've got an article on report cards, haven't you?
Yes.
Which probably, as CEO of the NJ, I don't know whether you would or wouldn't have covered that. Well, that's the question. Would you?
That's a question. Well, I think I would have done, because I think that's probably slightly outside party politics is his way. I think it is an argument that one can make from a professional standpoint, and I suppose that's the point maybe I've been trying to make, not very eloquently, is you have to remain professional, don't you, all the time. It's trying not to bring your own personal views into things. And just another little example of that is when I was tweeting from as CEO of NGA, I only ever did governance, and I only ever did our official line, which obviously I'd helped create, and I didn't do anything that was about the rest of my life. Whereas I just joined Blue Sky last week, and I thought, oh, I can do this stuff about books here. And because you suddenly, like, actually, I'm a whole person now. I'm not just this bit of me that's the professional.
Yes.
So I hope I would have talked to both, HMCI and government ministers about that. And I think.
Can you just explain, because those who haven't, because it's just been published, hasn't it? So
yes.
Your main point is that I think that you don't think Ofsted's role should be around the report card. I think that's
yes.
top and bottom of it, isn't it? Really.
That is a very good summary.
But you wrote a lot of words just to say that. But
yeah, sorry.
What's the thinking behind it, I suppose?
Right. So the thinking about that is I've written quite a bit about the web of accountability, that in the English school system, we tend to focus way too much on Ofsted as being the accountability tool or lever. And of course, with all our public services, there's a whole range of things from the law to democracy to auditors of various sorts to social accountability, how we interact with stakeholders, the media. So I've written quite a bit on that. There's a book being published by John Catt in the new year called Beyond Belief, where I hopefully talk about that a little bit more coherently. And I think we've really seen the damage over the last 5 or more years in the school sector by becoming obsessed, might be the wrong word, but concentrating entirely on Ofsted, and I think this is where governance plays in as well, because I've always used the line that governance should be the first line of accountability.
Yes.
any organisation, including a school or trust. And it's you know, by trying to make that argument and saying actually governance is really rather important, it's very hard to make it in that context of, oh, but there's Ofsted looming over it all. So it seems completely wrong to me that given the power that Ofsted has in the field, to make them the architects of what is going to be seen as our measures of quality and success. So the reason I felt qualified to say that was because way back when, 25, I looked it up, 25 years ago, we had best value legislation.
Oh, yes.
We all had to prove, especially if we were getting public funding from bodies, from local authorities, that we were best value. And so I worked in the legal advice sector at that point, and it became my job to pull all the representative bodies together and develop a balanced scorecard so we could say to our funders, look, you know, we are good value, we are doing good things for the money and helping the community. So for a year, it was almost a year, we did this and presented it to the department at the time that oversaw the sector, was the business department, and they really liked it. And they didn't say to us, we should have done this, or somebody involved in regulation or inspection should have done this. They were really pleased that the profession had taken it upon themselves to do it. And it was tough. People were scared. It's a similar sort of, people were really worried they'd lose their money. So, but I just thought that parallel feels very similar to now, except that it's not the profession that's been given the space and the time to do it. And it gets into those bigger issues about trust. You know, there's the Reith lectures about that time, I think 2002, were all about accountability and trust. And Professor Neil makes fantastic arguments, I mean, obviously at great length and with great skill, about how those two things work together. And I think we're at that time now again. And I think with the new government, there's such an opportunity to say, hang on, we need to look at this from first principles. Let's look at the whole set of accountabilities. And why are we piling more into the Ofsted bucket when we've seen the damage and disharmony, distrust that has caused?
I think there's an issue here, isn't there, around I'm not optimistic about the France's review, curriculum review. You know, I think that's one point. But one element of that is collaboration. You know, that is saying to the sector, you know, let's hear what you've got to say. It's in stark contrast to the way that the report card has been developed, you know. And actually, this affects everybody, and not just. And I think the thing for me, it doesn't just affect education. I mean, we've got, you know, this is branching out into social care, into health, you know, and even into housing. This is an area that really does need cross-government involvement, I think, you know, so we don't end up just with an education report card with tentacles spreading out and things coming into the report card from other sectors, other departments, you know. It feels to me ridiculous that we've got this situation, and you know, I was really pleased to read your piece about it.
Good. Well, the other thing, just while I'm talking about the old days and measures, the other thing I once worked on, again, you may remember way back when there was something called Opportunity for All, and what reminded me is it pulled all the key government departments together to work on child poverty. And I was the rep. In fact, I helped instigate it. I was working at the local government association at the time, and I was the rep on that one. And it worked. Well, I know I was part of it, so I would say, oh, was it?
Oh, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. Nothing better.
That's brilliant. But I certainly wasn't responsible for the measures. But what happened year on year, and I went on for quite a few years, that central government had to publish the Opportunity for All measures. And they were fascinating because some of the things that were measured, you wouldn't necessarily expect it to, such as accidents and you know, referrals to A&E. They're hugely skewed to disadvantage. And one of the things actually that is even more so now than then is dental.
Oral
dental
hygiene.
dental
Absolutely.
extraction. So it is a very complex area, and one of the things that governors and trustees were telling us more and more and more, and I think it's probably commonly accepted over everyone involved in the school sector now, is how much the whole disadvantage and closing the gap agenda is actually influenced by all those other things out there that you just mentioned. Schools are being pulled into trying to deal with other things that have either disappeared or are swamped. So I think now is really time for that cross departmental approach.
Just tying that up, Frank, you'll remember when we first inspected, we had to make a value for money judgment on the school.
Yes.
So there was a we used to call it a leap in the dark. You say, how much does the school cost? How well is it doing? Right, okay then. That looks like good value.
Yeah.
The most ridiculous judgment
Yes.
for an individual to make based on a 3 or 4 day visit to a school.
Yeah.
But that was tying in, everybody had to have value for money.
Yeah.
There was also the issue here around the shift. And we're on to inspection again, but it's actually how the accountability process is still too driven by institutional or single sector evaluations. So this is the thing, the point you were making, about some schools simply can't overcome some of the disadvantages that they're facing. And this expectation that within the institution, every institution, is able to actually address all of these concerns.
Yeah.
Using an example, well, there is a school somewhere in the country that's managed to do that. But the point you made before about going into your meeting in Surrey and one in Sunderland, these are completely different places, with different types of people, different needs, different, contexts around them. So all of this is part, I think, of where we need to get to with the accountability.
Absolutely. On a sort of
evaluation.
Slightly related but different issue. Do you remember when we had the pupil premium awards? That must have been with the coalition government. Must have been. I think it was David Laws who very much pushed it. They got decent amount of money. The people that won the pupil premium awards. But we held an event at one point and pulled together some of the winners, and they had completely different stories and completely different solutions. We even did one up in the northwest, northeast, sorry, where the schools weren't that dissimilar, but they had taken the complete opposite approach. And I thought, gosh, what are the learnings from this? One had basically taken a very community-based approach, and the other one had said, actually, our community is our problem. We're the sanctuary for these pupils, and we're going to sort it. And I was thinking, coming away from that discussion, I'm not really any wiser on how to really do it. And you can take bits of learning, can't you, from other places, but the context is always crucial, isn't it?
I still think we should be doing community assessments and not individual schools or and say this is what it's like to live in this area. There are 5 schools, most of which are good. One is outstanding. The healthcare is deemed as good overall. And get a picture of what it's like to live in this area, and then you can say to some level of accountability, okay, health service, we've noticed that the children are not well fed and not and that's affecting that measure. So what can you do as your part to improve that for the community?
Absolutely. In fact, this is where perhaps, Frank, I can say something that I probably wouldn't have done at the
I knew
time.
we'd get there in the end, Stan.
I was I had the real pleasure to be, and you may remember that NAHT did 2 commissions on accountability. Gosh, probably 3 years ago now, when Nick Brooke chaired, and I think their reports were quite influential, particularly around the floor targets, and getting at that point we still very much had that as our second line of accountability. But why I mention it is because it really fits with your point, Stan, that there were quite a few of us on that commission that were saying we ought to recommend that accountability was at place area. Because we've all been talking, haven't we? I think the whole time I was NGA, we were talking about how do we improve collaborations. And that's the bit that we still, in some areas, and that's why it's so different again from place to place, isn't it? In some areas, schools are working brilliantly together, and in other areas, it's simply not really happening anymore. But the idea being that if it was responsibility for whatever measures one came up with across the area, then schools would have to support each other. You couldn't do the thing of saying, maybe we're not going to take that type of pupil. Yes. Maybe they'd be better off over there, because actually they're all our children. And I think the reason it didn't get into the final report was some people were saying that's really hard. How would you do it? Whereas I was one of the people going, oh, we should try.
Yeah.
Because the dysfunctions that we have and some of the disincentives that we have at the moment is because people are understandably concerned about their own pupils. But I think, again, that's a conversation we ought to be having now.
Yeah. I mean, the schools are concerned with their own results, their own measure, because of the fear of that going down. And so, I mean, I worked in an authority where there was a genuine commitment to work on behalf of the children, until you got to the point of saying, well, actually, your school might want to lend one of your teachers to school down the road. And I fully understand it. Well, can't do that because, we need them in our school to keep our school at the level it's at.
Yeah.
And that gets really hard then.
I think, to me, and we'll move off after this if this is all right. I mean, get into what's caught our eye. But the issue here is around if inspection is about making judgments as opposed to finding out evidence, gathering evidence and evaluating its impact. So if your inspection is about giving a grade, then actually that makes it, for me, quite insular. It's about institutional sort of activities. If inspection is actually undertaken to try and unpick where are some of these blockages, what are the issues, both within the institution, in other institutions, and in the setting itself, the area, what are those blockages? Let's identify those. At the moment, we have schools that are actually trying to hide some of the problems that they're experiencing, in order to get what they think is going to be a better grade, rather than actually saying, look, we've got a massive problem with CAMS here, massive problem with getting a dentist for children, those are some of our big problems, and then the inspection can then focus on, well, what is the dental service? What are the dental services like? That would be, I think, for the school and the community, much more helpful than just saying school A is good, school B is not good.
Yeah,
which is
absolutely. And I do remember talking about that with ministers, absolutely, years ago, right from pretty much, the beginning of my time at NGN. And, Lord Nash, people might be quite surprised to hear he was the Minister for Governance in the School System for a number of years. He really took on board things like CAMS, and he had can't quite remember why he got very passionate about young carers, but he was. So behind the scenes, he was trying to do some of that join up. But if it's not built into the system, it doesn't happen. It can't work just because, lots of different people at different points in the system are saying this is important. And I think the difference is now from 15 years ago is that pretty much all of us are saying these things are crucial. There's not really a community, is there, across the land that doesn't have problems with CAMS or housing or whatever it might be.
Even a simple grading on the network of schools in an area, so that your school couldn't achieve whatever the superlative is across the board unless the 3 nearest schools to you were also in that category.
Yes, exactly, Stan. I needed you on this commission with me because
it would just be a grade on the scorecard, but it would be one that people might think, well, actually, if we want to be X across the board, we really need to help out in the other 3 schools in our area.
I mean, it is the mantra at the moment, isn't it? Whether they can convert it is more collaboration and less competition, and I think that's got to be. There's got to be some significant.
Can't do it as long as you
accountability framework for that to happen.
If you judge schools as independent units, you cannot expect them to go out of the way to help others.
Yeah. Well, that gets us into a discussion about RISE and all of that, but we'll leave that for another chat. So, Stan, what's caught your eye this week? Bearing in mind, I think we've had half an hour already.
Well, this is completely off the wall. It was Australia and the Australian government who've now passed a law that says that under 16s cannot have access to the various social media sites, and they've named the sites. It won't be acted upon till next year, but it just strikes me as one of those things that is so hard. How are they going to know if a 15-year-old is accessing Facebook?
Mm.
Because for all the systems there are for checking age, a VPN, for example, a virtual private network, wipes all that out because you can't trace the person.
Yeah.
I was reading somewhere that 20% of children in this country admit that they use a different age when they're on various websites, and so it's.
Stan, you never said that you were 18 when you were buying beer from an off license, did you? You never said that years ago.
Uh,
Come
I'm
on,
just
Stan.
thinking, I didn't need to because I had a friend who was taller and bigger, and he was always the one that was pushed to the front to say, "Well, he's 18, we might not be."
Yeah.
No, but it's the fines for the company because there is, from what I read, that there's no provision for punishing children who get on, but there is massive fines, tens of millions of dollars fines for the companies if they're found to be allowing children on, and I just can't see how it works. And
Mm.
the other thing that sticks in my mind is, I'm sure in terms of children's rights and people's rights, they've got a case to say I should be able to access some of these things.
The, isn't the issue?
Mm.
Yeah,
I
isn't the
think that
issue?
happened in America. I think in America, one state did it, and then it was completely overturned by a judge who said
Yeah.
it broke the constitutional rights.
But the heart of it, though, isn't it? This is about whether they're publishing stuff. Um, and to me, the issue, even if it was just a comment, I've tried to complain to Twitter on a number of occasions about offensive tweets which I've read. They're not about me, but I've read stuff, and I thought that, either the language or the tone or misogyny in it, every single one has been rejected. All of them meet their
Yeah.
criteria. Not one has been taken down. And so, in a way, I feel as though there is much, much more that these companies should be doing to police their own
I
their own
agree.
sort of
Right.
Yeah.
platforms.
Well,
And
that would be my solution to say, instead of trying to stop young people getting on social media, we need to control or manage what's on social media so
mm,
that it's not a harmful place to be. And you're right, I think companies have got a lot to do. And with AI developing as it is, that should become easier and easier to limit what people can say, what they do. But then you've got the other end, you've got people who say free speech is free speech
yeah, well,
without accountability.
yeah, is it J.S. Mill?
Mm.
You can have your freedom as long as it doesn't interfere with my freedom, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, we'll come back to that, Stan, won't we?
Mm. I mean, in a way, it is quite interesting that another country is having a go. I don't know enough about this to know whether it'll have any success or not. But it is an issue. I think a lot of us are worried about with the increase we were just mentioning what we mental health and young people. And I'm not putting it absolutely all in the social media box, but it'll be interesting to see if it works, if it does have effect, if it doesn't. But that may be a bit mean to be saying let's use
think
Australian youth
I
as
thought,
the sort of
why
petri
not?
dish.
Why?
I think it said that messaging services wouldn't be affected, so
Well,
they
Right.
weren't included. So, and I would suspect that most bullying comes through things
yeah,
like um,
Right.
WhatsApp and stuff like that.
WhatsApp and things like that, where they
Right.
directly not. I would
Yeah.
think so.
I remember
So
we went to China on a holiday about 8 years ago, and at the time, my wife was very keen on Facebook, and of course, China blocked Facebook.
Oh
They had their
yes.
own sort of Facebook, but then the tour guide, lovely lady, said, "Oh, we'll just get VPN on it." We'd never come across VPN before, Stan. So you can access Facebook in China at the time. I don't know if you can now, just by downloading the VPN, and that allowed you then access to Facebook. So in a way, it does make you think that is the technology moving so quickly? And actually, let's face it, if there's a workaround, a 14-year-old is more likely to find it than I
Yeah.
would.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay, Emma, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, I'm very pleased that Stan's gone international there, because I was also been thinking about, and again, an area I'm not an expert in but very interested in COP. We've just had the annual COP finish, haven't we, in Baku, and that wasn't a very, very edifying experience, with so many, you know, petrochemical companies and their power and influence, which of course is a governance issue. You know, who has power, who has influence, and then, you know, the real divisions in, so what should the developed world be doing to compensate the developing world. And yes, they ended up with some sort of agreement, but it really wasn't what anything wanted. And that, you know, that's becoming more and more urgent, isn't it? I couldn't believe that it was actually 4 years ago that we had COP in Glasgow, and that's when education was very much a core theme. And in fact, again, at NG at the time, we took advantage of that to launch the greener governance campaign, and it was something we've been working on with a whole bunch of actually wonderful stakeholders in the education community, some real experts on sustainability, and looking at it from all sorts of areas, both the curriculum and community, but also just the physical, the estates, and how we can reduce carbon footprint that way as well. So there is good work going on within the sector, but I still, and obviously I'm a little bit further away from that than I would have been 6 months ago. But I worry sometimes that it's still not mainstream enough. There are lots of great advocates and folk that know a lot about it, but whether you could say that across all our 22,000 school buildings is another matter. So I just wanted to give a bit of a plug for, let's not
Well, could you put it on your report card?
Yes, absolutely.
Actually, if you were, they may only be 10 measures. I suppose the question is, how important is sustainability?
Exactly.
Really,
the planet.
If they wanted it to be really important, they would make sure that it was one of the measures that was covered.
And also the other thing one should do if you're developing that sort of, any sort of accountability actually, is talk to the stakeholders. So if you talk to pupils, and the survey this year that was done with the big listen from the Children's Commissioner didn't have quite the same question, so you couldn't compare. But when she did it a couple of years ago, the planet came up in the top 3 areas pupils were really concerned about. And I think there's a real age dimension to this often, isn't it? So I think that's exactly the sort of discussion we ought to be having. How many of these are we going to have, and what really fits as a priority?
And also look forward. Let's look forward as to what those measures can help us do better, rather than just measure what we know now, because these will have it will point, the arrow will point in a slightly different direction if we choose certain types of measures than
absolutely. And that's the whole, that intelligent accountability again that the Reith lectures introduced to a wider audience. The whole point about measures it's the beginning of the process, and we used to repeat that ad infinitum. This isn't a judgment on anybody, a piece of data. It's the start of a conversation, and that we need to think about it in that way.
Well, I don't know if you saw, I mean, it was an article to say that we're losing the so many schools are good and outstanding as a judgment, which I think is a good thing because it's been twisted. But the data that went with it, I thought was quite interesting. That I'm presuming it went back about 15 years. Inadequate schools were either 3 or 4% every year. So you could ask, what's the point?
Yes,
a bigger discussion there. Yes.
That actually that percentage hasn't changed. 3 and 4%
Yeah.
every year.
And those schools are in the same sort of areas.
Yeah.
And again, Adrian Gray, who I have a lot of time for, was making this case 15 years ago. And in a way, the deterioration in the pupil premium is just an indication, really, that those areas that need the funding most have not kept up. They've actually been more adversely affected. And it's interesting that there have been EPI and I know the organisation I'm linked to, Northern Powerhouse Partnership, have been pushing for a big review on pupil premium funding, in order to begin to address some significant difficulties within the funding formula. And Angela Rayner made clear this week that government funding was going to be diverted into areas, basically taken away from areas that have less disadvantage into areas that have the most. And I really welcome that. I mean, we got
right. Did I read this right that pupil premium doesn't work doesn't impact on early years at all?
No.
And therefore free school meals doesn't
or post 16, as far as I'm aware.
Yes.
But the other thing
early years.
I know, but I
most crucial bit.
Honestly, I can't. I said this before on this chat. Sorry, we're going well over time now. But the thing for me, Cheadle is getting a new railway station. Okay, it had £25 million from the town fund to build or to rebuild the railway station that was closed under the beaching cuts. We are, I think, the area I live in, we're the most privileged areas in the country for a town funding that was meant to be going to, rebuilding and regenerating, sort of areas that needed that. We got it purely because it was a marginal seat. It didn't stop the Lib Dems winning the seat. But actually, we're now got a new railway station going to open next year or the year after. You just think, we should stop that now. Give that money to somewhere else that really does need it. We don't need it. Well, it'd be great to have it, but actually we don't really need it.
I don't think you could be more connected to the motorways where you live than.
No, I tell you, I could throw a
transport's really not an issue there.
Anyway.
Oh, don't let us get onto trains though. She said I could put an argument that in Warwickshire where we have.
Well, you might say on sustainability as well.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was going to say. The whole Midlands and how you get from the Midlands to the north. Oh my goodness.
Well, when you get to the north, there's no trains anyway, so there's no point.
But actually, I went to an event in Nottingham and I drove past the building work for HS2. And it's really quite impressive. You think there's masses of countryside and whatever, tunnels. The fact that it's not coming to the north, my goodness, honestly, it's running by, is it the M42? It runs by the M42, I think it is,
It very much comes, it's a very big local issue around here. It comes all around us. They spent a fortune building tunnels and things.
Right.
Anyway, let's not do trains.
My final one. I met a couple of colleagues who I used to work with. I just really wanted to say that this week we had lunch together, and the thing that strikes me all the time is that if you surround yourself, when you're looking to appoint people, surround yourself with really nice, committed individuals who want to put the organisation at the forefront of their lives. You're onto a winner. And I met those colleagues this week. One has stepped down from their role because of ill health. Another one has decided that it's time to move on. But actually, they're just really nice people. Very easy to talk to. Can be very open with them. They're not gossipy. It's just lovely. So I just really wanted to, make that point that good people are good people and they're worth appointing and they'll stick with you and do everything they can to help you.
Frank, any success I had was because the team around me were better than me, and that's how it works.
But also, these colleagues like the humility as well. I loved it in a leader as well. The leader wasn't taking all the glory. I mean, there are times when you've got to stand up and you take it, but actually you know full well it's because everybody else has made you look better than you really are. Yeah.
No, that's completely so. The philosophy that I was trying to use as well. And I know people sometimes thought that I was a bit, fluffy when I did say things like, actually, structures aren't the be all and the end all. It's the people. Good people make structures work. And actually, that's what we need to concentrate on, people and their development. So I couldn't agree with you more. The people that you work with are absolutely key, aren't they? And actually it goes back a little bit to, I might have mentioned it last time because I was part of the group that develops the framework for ethical leadership, and we put kindness in there. We had a big debate about whether it should be compassion or love, and we ended up with kindness. But for that reason, Frank, it is crucial, isn't it?
Well, that takes us back, doesn't it, Stan, to the very first Frank and Stan chat.
Yeah, where we said,
Stan, what did you say?
We said we'd be kind to people. I think that was we would criticise, but we would be kind.
Yeah.
Not sure we kept that all the time.
We were tested. We have been tested.
Yeah.
But anyway, let me just bring this to a close because I think we've been chatting for nearly getting on for 45 minutes. So, Emma, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Emma.
When that book, there is a book simmering somewhere. When that book actually gets published, we'll invite you back on. All right. So,
brilliant.
Yeah. So that means you've got to complete it now.
Oh no! And the trouble is, I made the mistake of it. My final speech at the NGA conference in the summer of announcing that I was writing a book, and now, of course, people go, "How are you getting on with the book?" I was like, "I wish I'd never mentioned it."
Okay. Well, next week we have Dr. Vic Carr, who's been a guest here before, amazing head teacher, an army reservist, and a host of other things. So Vic's back with us next week, and then we have one final chat before Christmas with Eric Craven, the Scouse poet. So that will be us for 2024. But we have a load of guests lined up into the summer in 2025. So if our health continues to hold out, we'll be there on a Friday morning doing these chats. So thanks for joining, and we'll all see you soon. Take care, and thank you again, Emma. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.